Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Megan, and I'm back with another book in my Stephen King project where I read all of his works in chronological order. Today I'm talking about Pet Sematary. So, I feel like I'm so Pet Cemeteried out. So this book has 4 movie adaptations to it, and I watched them like back to back, and now I'm so done with this story that I'm like, I don't know if I like it anymore. So first off, let's talk about the book. I rated this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a little slow. The progression was like, it took some time to get into it, but I appreciated that King like opened up the world for us, and he like gave us a lot of imagery and a lot of plot development, and it was, even though it was slow progressing, um, each week I feel like I got a little bit more of the world. There were some parts where I was kind of like, wait, what's happening? But I think he did a good job of overall bringing things back and literally, and bringing everything together, except for I'm not a big fan of the ending, but we'll get there. So this book is let me just start by saying I thought this book was about like a pet death. I didn't realize how dark this book was going to go. Like, this is about a child's death, and that blew me away because I was like, really? I was like, wow, I was not expecting this. And you know what's really interesting is, so the 2019 remake of the movie, I actually went to see that in theaters with a friend of mine who's also a big Stephen King fan, and I must have blocked that out of my brain because going into this, I couldn't tell you what happened in the movie. I mean, when I rewatched the movie, I was like, oh, I remember this. I remember seeing this, but before I was like, I don't remember anything about this. So I mean, I guess that's a good thing because yeah, I went in and I was like, this is so much darker than I had anticipated. Like, this takes a very, very good look at death and how maybe things shouldn't come back, and how even though you're grieving something and you desperately will give anything to have them back, there's a consequence to that, essentially. And that's what King really dives deep into in this book. Like, obviously he accidentally brings back the cat. Church comes back, but Church comes back different. He's not the same cat that he was before. And so our main character Lewis, um, discovers, well, technically it's Judd, their neighbor, who introduces them to the pet cemetery, and there's a spot just beyond the pet cemetery where you can bury your things, and they might come back. And so, because he knows that his daughter really loves the cat, he's like, I'll help you bury it there, and maybe it'll come back. And like I say, it does, and it's not the same cat that we knew and loved. And everyone can tell that the cat's kind of different. And so when the whole accident with the young boy, with the child happens, and Lou is so grief stricken about the loss of his son that he goes to bury it, and Judd's like, oh no, what have I done? Because it's only ever happened once where they buried a person and they came back and it was not good. So I was like, oh, this is interesting, and I just thought it was a very good look at grief, and like doing everything you want, like everything in your power to bring something back, but when they come back, will they come back the same person that they were, or the same thing that they were? And it was just really, really good. I really enjoyed that. I liked the parts with the daughter where she was having these premonitions about, like, oh, daddy's in trouble, like something's happening, and so that played back to like, so there's a death at the very beginning of the book, and King brings it back with the daughter, and how like so the guy who died in the beginning knew about the pet cemetery and was warning him, but Lou didn't take it as a warning, and his daughter is now having these like visions and nightmares about, oh, like something's happening with the pet cemetery, and he's like, how the hell, like they're like, what is this, how does she know about, like, and it was very good. I liked that. What I didn't like was the ending. in which we get this point of view that we've never really had before. It's like a coworker of Lou's, and he basically tells what happens in a third person point of view, and then we lose the daughter. Like, she was such a main focal point for the last chunk of the book, because like it was basically like well, it was back and forth between Lou and his wife Rachel, and like the two point of views, and then like you were getting a lot through the daughter with her premonitions, nightmares, visions, whatever you want to call them. And then all of a sudden, like as soon as it got to the end, you were like, well, what about the daughter? What happened? I'm like, what happened to her? Because like um you see what happens to Lou, you see what happens to the wife, you see what happens to the son, and you see what happens to Judd. Well, what happened to the daughter? So I was like, I don't like how he turned that around and was like, here's a third person point of view from like someone who's outside of the story, outside of the narrative. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I get that like he wanted like an outsider observer to give us this point of view, but I didn't like it. And I, like I say, didn't like that we didn't know where the daughter was going. So yeah, so I ended up rating this 4 stars. Like I say, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the concept, and I enjoyed the themes of this. And so yeah, I mean, I'd highly recommend the book. It was, despite the interesting ending, I'm like, the book was good. So the first movie, which came out in 1989, which is a very, very literal adaptation to the book. Like, it was literally a play-by-play, chapter-by-chapter, almost, I feel like it could have been a word-by-word of the book. I rated that one 3 stars. I enjoyed it because I was watching it and I was like, oh, okay, like, I know exactly what's happening. I mean, they had to take things out for time, so there were some parts where I was like, well, if you didn't read the book, how do you know how point A to point B to point C happened? So there were a few points where I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then they changed a few things about the way that Rachel, the wife, was coming back, but I'm like, I understand that they probably had to do that, because how are they gonna, so she comes back on a plane, and then she's driving, so they just cut it all out. She's driving and she hits a tree. Like, they changed things around a little bit, but I mean, I understand that, because for the sake of having to film something, it's probably easier and cheaper to do what they did instead of having all of the theatrics that were in the book. So I get that. The fact that it was kind of like a very literal translation of the book, I was like, oh, okay. Some people really like that, but I thought it was, I was like, it's okay. It was a good 3 star. I mean, it wasn't scary. I was like, I mean, the book, I didn't find what was scary about the book was the fact that, was like thinking about death and thinking about what comes after death, because nobody knows. So that's probably the most scariest part. Like, the movie wasn't able to hit so hard on that level, because it's harder to, I feel like it's harder to show that sometimes than it is to write it out. So that's where I stood on that. Then I watched Pet Sematary 2, which was released in 1992, which was literally a sequel to the first one. So we're back in Ludlow, Maine, where another family is now moving into well, no, Judd's house. They're moving back into this place. There were little nods to the first one where we passed the Creed house and you see the mailbox. You see the Pet Sematary, which I'm assuming is the exact same scene, or the exact same set from the first one. So there's like little nods here and there to the first one, but it's basically a continuation where the town knows what happened to the Creed family. It's become lore. Everybody knows. It's like, ooh, spooky tales, because like one of the kids is like, they're at a campfire and they're like talking about it. And I rated this one, I think I rated it 3.5. It felt very 90s. It felt very nostalgic based. I don't know. It was just very, it was, I don't know how else to describe it other than it was very 90s in the way that it was filmed. The actors did a really good job. The kid who, the actor who played the main kid, he was so broody and so emo. It worked so well. It was so perfect. And then you had the guy who played the sheriff, who went from like extremely mean to extremely calm. It was so chilling, but it was so good. Then we had Anthony Green, Anthony Green is his ER character. No, I'm mixing them up. His name is Anthony Edwards. his character name on ER was Mark Green. I was mixing them up. He was also in this, and I thought he did a great job of this too. I mean, I love his acting. I mean, I loved him in ER, so I'm a little biased to that, but this was before ER, so I thought it was really, he did a really good job of being, he was a vet in this one, so I thought that was kind of cool. I thought the plot was really interesting. I mean, I thought there was a little too many people deaths, because it was really interesting, because, like, first they try it out on the dog comes back, the dog's like this killer dog, and then they're like, and I feel like they did more, the reason they were bringing people back was less because they were grieving, and more out of fear, because the first person that they bring back, like, they accidentally kill him because he's mean, the sheriff, and then when they accidentally kill him, they're like, oh, I guess we might as well bring him back because maybe he'll become better and I mean, he did become a better person, but then he was on a killing spree. It was very interesting, and then all these people kept dying, and they kept coming back from the pet cemetery, and I was like, this is just getting super weird, and like, and so then, because the main character had lost his mom, he was like, they set it up really well where it was like, oh, like, he's grieving, like, as they move to this town, he's grieving his mother's death, so you would think that he would right away go and bury his mom in the pet cemetery so that she can come back. But they did not do that. They did all these other deaths and all this other stuff, and then they brought her back, and I was like, I feel like they set this up so well only to watch it fail. But I mean, I still enjoyed this. It was a lot gorier than the first one, because like I say, there was a lot of deaths, but I enjoyed it. Then we moved on to Pet Sematary 2019. I rated this one, I think, 3 stars. So this wasn't a complete literal translation of the book, which was great. But what they did do was they changed a lot. So instead of it being the young boy who died, they changed it to the daughter who died, which I'm like, okay, to give them credit, they probably could do a little bit more with the daughter, because she was, and they aged her up a bit too. And so I feel like they were able to do more with the daughter, whereas, like, asking a toddler to be creepy and acting is hard, but I mean, asking a 9-10-year-old to do creepy things is easier, so I feel like they were able to do a little bit more with her. So her scenes were a lot creepier, but otherwise, I was like, oh, I mean, it was a remake that I feel like we probably didn't need. But speaking of remakes that we didn't need, they did one this year, like in 2023, called Pet Sematary Bloodlines, where they take us back to 1969, and Judd is supposed to be a young guy, but I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, because if you've read the book, you know that Judd was born in the year 1900, because he was an 80-something-year-old man in the book, and now we're back in 1969, and he's now, like, in his early 20s. I was like, no, this doesn't make sense. I don't like this. But this was such a useless movie, because it was like, they wanted to show how the pet cemetery had started, essentially. And I'm like, they touched upon it, but they touched upon it in flashbacks. It wasn't like they touched upon it, like they went all the way to the beginning. No. They were like, this is Judd as a young kid trying to leave Ludlow, but he can't because things are, like, the kid that they talked about who was buried was the one who came back and started killing people in the town, and so all he wants to do is leave, but apparently, so I guess he doesn't leave, and I was just like, and then, like, he learns about stuff, he learns about the pet cemetery, and he learns about the book, or well, not about the book, but he learns about it in a book, in the church, about how all these ancestors ago, they found this land and they buried it, they buried their I guess their fallen men, and from there they rose, and that's where you get, like, the beginning and the origins, and I'm like, can we just have had that movie instead? Why did we have to have all this flashback? Which, I mean, we didn't need Judd. I didn't need this. Nobody needed this. I think I rated it 1.5 stars, because I was like, this was a waste of an hour and a half, because I was like, yeah, I didn't need this. Was something I didn't need. So, yeah, I'm all Pet Cemeteried out. I'm done with the cemetery. I'm ready to move on. And we are moving on to Cycle of the Werewolf. So I I haven't started this yet, but I'm going to be starting it very soon. And it looks like it is a collection of short stories, each one taking place for every month of the year. So this takes place over the course of the year, which is probably the cycle of the werewolf. So I'm very excited to get to this one. It's relatively thin, so I feel like I will be back talking about this very, very soon. But if you've read Pet Sematary, let me know your thoughts on it. I would love to hear them. You can pop them in the comments below. And that is all I have for you guys today. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, a like, a subscribe, a do your thing, and I will see you all in my next video. So thank you, and bye guys!